Hi, I'm Andrea Stanley of Valley Malt, and this is the Brewer to Brewer podcast from All About Beer. My guest today is Lindsay Barr of Draft Lab Sensory Software, and she is here for a conversation with me that goes beyond the brew house and into topics that matter to brewing professionals and curious beer drinkers. First, please visit allaboutbeer.com and follow on social media at allaboutbeer. And to support journalism in the beer space, check out patreon.com/allaboutbeer. Well, we'll get into the conversation in just a moment, but first, this message.
First Tea is a proud sponsor of the Brewer to Brewer podcast. Some of the brightest brewers across the country have discovered the First Tea advantage. Hill Farmstead, Sweetwater Brewing Company, and Angry Chair are among the many who have used First Tea's unique and quality teas and botanicals to create top-rate beers. First Tea focuses on being direct, flexible, and fast. You can find out more about First Tea's collaboration with brewers and tea ingredients by visiting firsttea.com/blog. That's FIRSDTEA.com/blog.
All About Beer is back, and we're asking for your support to help provide the independent beer media this rich and colorful industry deserves. Visit our website, allaboutbeer.com, where we're frequently posting new content. And please consider throwing us a few bucks at patreon.com/allaboutbeer. We have low-cost memberships for individuals and small and large companies alike. Every dollar goes to help produce new articles and podcasts.
Looking for an easy hop sourcing experience? Yakima Valley Hops offers the finest quality hops from right here in our valley and premium growing regions around the world. Get the hops you need when you need them with ultra-fast shipping and awesome customer service. With a full line of liquid hop products and all your favorite varieties, no contracts are needed to brew with the best. Shop now at yakimavalleyhops.com. That's YAKIMA valleyhops.com.
Okay, let's get into it. A bit about my guest today. Lindsay is the CSO and founding partner of Draft Lab Sensory Software, where she helps food and beverage companies use tasting technology to make products that people love. After earning a master's in food science from UC Davis, she began her career at New Belgium Brewing Company, managing the sensory and consumer research program. Along with her work at Draft Lab, she teaches sensory for the Master Brewers course at UC Davis and the Siebel Institute, and judges global beer competitions. During her career, she has published numerous groundbreaking techniques to lower the barrier to entry into sensory science and continues to be passionate about making sensory accessible for all businesses. She currently lives in San Francisco and could be found running or lounging in Golden Gate Park, sailing, or playing around in the Castro. Lindsay, welcome. It's so good to be on this podcast with you. Thank you so much for saying yes to letting me ask you questions and have us talking all about beer.
Thanks for the invite. I'm excited about it.
So the reason why I chose you is because, I love you.
I love you too.
And you have done an incredible job in assisting craft maltsters and brewers and even grain growers by engaging in and understanding the flavor attributes of malt, arguably one of the most important ingredients in beer. Part of why I love you, Lindsay, is about the way you get things done. You are somebody who is extremely collaborative. You're transparent, you're honest, and to back all of those wonderful personal qualities up, you are extremely informed in the scientific process. And so my first question and discussion that I would love to have with you is, why did you get involved in trying to and curious about trying to understand the sensory attributes of the ingredients in beer and not just stick with craft beer as a sensory playground.
Sure. Well, thanks for all those nice words. I feel similarly about you. Yeah, what got me interested in going a little bit deeper into raw materials? This was back in, I guess, 2014, right? I mean, part of beer flavor, a big part of beer flavor is malt flavor. And back in 2014, there was really no way of analyzing malt flavor. We all kind of theoretically, hypothesized that malt had a big impact on beer flavor, but that was still a debate back in 2014. That was still up for questioning. And around the same time, craft maltsters were kind of starting to pop up all over the place. And I was interested in just kind of finally putting that question to bed, like whether or not it mattered. And my master's thesis was actually in gluten-free beer production. So at the time, I was also working with different alternative grains to make gluten-free beer, and knew that malt flavor, when it came to different grains, really, really mattered. So we know that it matters, but we wanted to finally answer that question and in some ways quantify it, just so that malt could be taken more seriously in beer production. I think now it is taken quite seriously in beer production. But it was a bit of a journey because there was even still a discussion about what flavors even come from malt. Again, we all kind of knew, but there really wasn't a ton of research, and we just didn't really want it to be debated anymore.
Yeah, no, it was interesting. 2014, the seminal white paper that the BA did called Malting Barley Characteristics for Craft Brewers identified gaps in the between what craft brewers wanted in their malt supply and what the current malt supply or supply chain was delivering. And right at the top, craft brewers identified a mismatch in distinct flavors and aromas. And I remember when that paper came out, I'm just going to really quickly read here that the most commonly cited attribute that craft brewers were saying they needed to fill the gap was an emphasis on flavor, calling it priority one for craft brewers. And that in the last 10 to 25 years, there was a trend toward ever increasing flavor neutrality that must be reversed. And, to make a statement like that, the Brewers Association was kind of setting themselves up a little bit for a debate on the topic, which then posed all of these opportunities, I guess, for us. Mm-hmm. And you really were one of the people that stepped up and said, okay, let's look at this from a scientific standpoint. If we're going to evaluate the attributes of malt and flavor and try to figure out what are distinct flavors and aromas that we're looking for, we need to, number one, have a method. Mm-hmm. Number two, have a lexicon. Number three, validate those methods. And that's a huge undertaking for an industry to take on. And nobody was really stepping up to do that work. And you and Cassie Liscombe from Breeze were two of the people that I would say stepped up and really were adamant and focused on making sure that we had the tools and we had the scientific process in place to really start having a honest debate about malt flavor and an awareness about it. Because really, like you were saying, a lot of it was kind of just this, let's choose some malt and say if we like it or not, which, isn't really a great way to talk about malt flavor and aromas. So I was just wondering, for people that are listening, if you could just talk about that process of how people in the industry decided to get together and collaborate, and what came out of that?
Yeah. So we did take a kind of systematic approach to ultimately trying to understand and verifiably, or just be able to quantify aromas and general flavors of malt. And I wanted to like be able to jump into that immediately. I wanted to be able to describe malt flavor and do it reliably, and be able to do all this research around different varieties and what they bring to the table, different maltsters and parameters, and what they all kind of contribute to malt flavor. I wanted to dive into that first. And I kind of did. I kind of started going down that path, and then realized when I went to go evaluate malt flavor that there wasn't any method to do this. There wasn't any like standardized method of evaluating malt flavor. And raw materials evaluations are kind of complicated because they do require different extraction methods that are intended for evaluating their sensory characteristics. And the method that we had at the time was chewing or Congress. And Congress wasn't made for a sensory evaluation. You get like it's made for extract. And so when people tasted Congress, it was just really sweet and a lot going on. So the first time that we really tried to evaluate malt flavor was just by chewing, and the tasters that were involved in that test just hated it, just could not do it. And you got to keep your tasters happy. So that was also what was going on. And the data was really muddy. So Cassie and I were we were in the same orbit. Cassie from Breeze, we were in the same orbit, and they had been working on this question for a while as well. So we decided to put our heads together along with you, and a couple of partner breweries and partner maltsters as well, to start playing around with what methods will work for the industry. And when we were looking at that, we wanted to make sure that the methods were approachable, affordable. Anybody could do it with minimal equipment, and relatively rapid, as fast as we could make it, while also really prioritizing being able to evaluate for flavor nuances. So after some tinkering and some playing around and some validating across different breweries and maltsters, the hot steep method was born. And the hot steep method is pretty widely accepted now as the standard method for sensory analysis of malt. And what's great about it is it follows all those parameters. We're able to use minimal equipment. It's affordable, it's fast, and it's an accurate way of evaluating for flavor. I think the resulting wort is generally around 5 Plato, and it's easy enough for panelists to be able to evaluate 10 or so samples without getting too fatigued. Whereas with chewing, you could only really evaluate a few samples, and it was highly fatiguing, and you kind of didn't get a representative sample size, and there were a lot of problems with that. So now we have a method. We published that method, I think in 2015, something like that. And it now exists, and most people are using it for sensory. So once we had a method, then we could start going into just describing malt flavor. And as a baseline for most sensory analysis, it kind of lowers the barrier to entry if you have a common lexicon for the industry, so that we can communicate more clearly across brewer and maltster and farmer, and so that we can better identify the product characteristics that we're trying to make. And we're all about, again, having an approachable lexicon that's built on analogy, not abstract terms, that takes relatively minimal training to be able to understand and utilize. And you were involved with a lot of that lexicon work as well. So I believe in 2015, we came up with the base malt flavor map. That was, again, an industry collaboration across maltsters, brewers, academics as well. And that's kind of the standard lexicon for base malt flavor. And then a year or so later, we all got together and did a specialty malt flavor map at Surly during a conference. And I can't remember what conference it was, but we all did that together, which was a lot of fun. So now we have these tools, and we have the method, we have the lexicon, and that really kind of spurred on more of an emphasis within the industry to start really analyzing the flavors that we're getting out of our malt.
I believe that event in Minneapolis was the Malt Flavor Symposium. Do you remember that?
How appropriate. Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
Yeah, that was great. So we got maltsters, brewers, again, some academics, and we all sat in a room and generated a whole bunch of terms for specialty malt, steeped probably about 20 different specialty malts across different process parameters. And that was really fun.
Yeah. And the scientific approach that I remember you taking with that was, you tried to collect the most diverse group of base malts first to do the base malt lexicon, and then again with specialty malts later on down the road. But so, dozens of different types of malts, you had dozens of people tasting those malts, coming up with terms. And then you started analyzing what are the terms that people are using the most, and how do we make those terms something that somebody that's new to this method and looking at these terms could be like, oh yeah, I mean, Cheerios is on there, right? It's a perfect, wheat thins. Like there are things there that everybody has probably had experience with and can identify with some of those terms when they're tasting malt for the first time.
Yep. That's kind of the approach. So with the base malt, I think we got multiple different varieties malted by different maltsters. Like the idea is to try to span the range of possible flavors within a category when coming up with the lexicon, which you're never going to achieve everything, but you can at least get a sample size that's big enough to where you can kind of get samples within the theoretical range of variation within that product category. So followed that philosophy with the base malt and with the specialty malt. And then essentially, if there was a little bit of overlap in what people were saying, then we would make sure that term gets into the map. And then we organize the map based off of the frequency of term use, which at first, it was a relatively small number of tasters doing that. But now that those terms have been integrated into DraftLab for a few years, we're now able to look at that data, look at what people are actually using, and change the order, the positioning of those terms based off of the frequency. And we're also able to take terms out that people may not be using and identify terms that people now are using. So, I mean, flavor lexicons are meant to change as our familiarity with the product changes, and as people get used to it. There's going to be different terms that kind of pop up, and as innovation happens, there will be new terms that pop up, and it should be fluid and it should be flexible, and it should reflect what the industry is making and interested in.
And then after the lexicon was developed, that led to the question of, okay, so we have, we're tasting malt now. We feel confident that we're tasting it in the right way, and that we have terms that we can all agree upon. And we might even have preferences of which malts that people like more than others. And so then again, you and Cassie and kind of a team of experts got together and asked the question, okay, so if a group of people prefer this malt, are they going to prefer the beer that was brewed with this malt? Mm-hmm. So that was work that, again, this is all in the span of about 2 years that this work was being done. And I remember us all presenting, I think in Nashville together at
CBC.
The CBC, which was, I think the day after our first arm wrestling competition that we put on together, which we'll talk more about later. So can you just, for our audience, talk a little bit about that validation and whether or not that was validating?
Yes. Yeah, I'll give you the medium-sized story on that. The medium-sized story is I was, this ambitious researcher, and I really wanted to start answering the question if about the variety question, the age-old variety question. So does variety matter when it comes to flavor? So all things kind of equal, what kind of driver is variety? So we did this huge, expansive research study with just 15 or so different varieties, replications, along with different maltsters malting the same varieties and blah, blah, blah. And we used a method called descriptive analysis where you're quantifying the intensity of different flavors in the product. And so I just poured over a ton of data, and I ultimately was just like, ugh, it's still so muddy. It's still so muddy. Like, I don't know. And I presented it actually at the Young Scientist Symposium in Ghent in like 2015 or something like that. And ultimately I was like, here's a whole bunch of data and here are some conclusions. Although like, it's not really all that definitive. And I even tried to answer, does malt flavor in the steep carry over to beer flavor? And that's a really, really difficult question to answer because fermentation is a whole thing. So I got this muddy result, and I decided to just take a huge step backward, not backwards, but a huge simplification step. And just asked, okay, generally if people like steeps and they choose to buy the malt that they like and make beer from it, does that preference transfer to beer? Because generally that's what people are doing when they're steeping. They're deciding, what am I going to buy? And is there a favorable flavor in one variety or one maltster over another? So simplified, and we ran a study where basically we looked at two sets of different malts. One was kind of what we would consider to be something that isn't necessarily made for beer. I think it was like a distiller's malt. I can't remember all the details, but one was like a distiller's malt. It wasn't really made for beer, so we didn't think that it was going to do all that well in a steep. And then we compared it to something that we theoretically thought would be favored. And then we did another test as well with two other samples. So we did a method of what's called paired preference, where in a steep you're asked, which one of these do you like most? So we made sure that the color and everything was kind of standardized, and we asked brewers, because brewers were the people making decisions. So we asked brewers this, and we saw significant differences in preference. And then what our question is, okay, once we make a beer with these malts, are we going to see a significant difference in preference with beer? I don't think it was distiller's malt. I can't remember what it was, but and what we saw was the exact same breakdown. So we saw kind of a 1-to-1 correlation with preference in the steep and preference in the beer. So we could say, okay, there might not be specific nuances that you're going to get from malt to beer, but your general liking is going to follow the same pattern from malt to beer. And then we also we scaled this up and did this at a homebrew conference. Cassie did this at a homebrew conference. She got somewhere around 150 homebrewers to taste steeps and to taste the beer made out of those steeps. And again, the results were replicated with that bigger group of people. So that was really validating for us. We at least now understood, okay, generally preference does translate. So the question about, well, does malt flavor translate to beer? Maybe not the specific nuances, but preference definitely does.
And it was a Helles, I believe.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
It was kind of a malt driven beer. It wasn't like a Imperial
Yeah.
IPA or something.
Yeah. And so the Craft Maltsters Guild, kind of over the years that you were doing some of this work, grew in membership, and Craft Malt has been, slowly growing in the impact that it's having in craft beer. And so the Craft Malt Guild now has a malt cup, an annual malt cup, which is a competition that It's a lot of fun, but I would say at this point, it's still highly educational in that, craft maltsters can send in their Pilsner malt or their pale malt. I think this year Vienna was included as a category. And you now have, because of Draft Lab and because of the lexicon and the hot steep method, we're able to have a competition that has a lot of rigorous sort of science behind it. And it's so interesting to see now, I think 3 or 4 years into doing the Craft Malt Cup, how this question that you were talking about that's been floating out there about malt flavor, some people argue that most malt flavor comes from the malt house. And then other people want to believe that malt flavor can come from a varietal or from a region. And I think that it's going to take decades to maybe have better data to sort of see where this will all land. But this year alone at the Craft Malt Conference, it was so interesting because I think we saw both. We saw that Root Shoot Malt won a whole lot of medals as they continue to win medals over the last several years. They're not only a grower, but they're the maltster. So they have a exceptional level of control over what they can do. But we're also seeing varieties rise to the top as well. So we saw that the variety Genie was a variety that, whether it was through Root Shoot or other malt houses, won a bunch of craft malt awards as well. So, I think that answer is hanging out there for us now that we're starting to utilize the method, utilize Draft Lab as a software system to make aggregating all this data possible. And just curious if you're also kind of sitting back and enjoying the education that we're all getting because of this work this foundation that was laid a few years ago.
Yeah, it's really neat. And the Craft Malt Cup is always a fun competition to be a part of. We kind of originally with Hannah, Hannah's just such a rock star from Montana State. She's really organizes a lot of that. But initially, the idea with the Craft Malt Cup was to elevate craft malt flavor and put more of an emphasis on it and drive more awareness about it. And competitions do that really, really nicely. So the first year was a lot of fun and a lot of people were interested in it. The results were interesting. The second year, I think the second year was COVID. So we kind of had to pivot some stuff. And and we had to mess around with sending samples out. And now we just have so many samples that we have to go through multiple tastings, some of which are remote and some of which are in person. And we kind of constantly are trying to figure out what's going to work best for being able to give the malt the best chances. And so we're talking about maybe doing all in person, whatever, but that's all besides the point. But to your point, Andrea, we have now years of data with these tastings with overall quality ratings and some flavor analysis. And we have associations with crop year and associations with maltster and with variety. And over time, I think we'll be able to start looking at that data in a more holistic way and be able to answer what are the main drivers of preference or of flavor when it comes to malt. And we are starting to see trends, like Root Shoot won a bunch of medals and Genie is winning a bunch of medals. So we're starting to see these trends and we're scratching our head, but we haven't really actually done the data analysis to look at what's really driving this.
Yeah. But if the BA were to give a report card about how the industry has come together to address this, I would say you get a pretty high score for helping to bridge this gap. And I don't know, obviously I'm highly invested in the work that you're doing, and that Draft Lab is doing. I don't know if it's being done in other sectors of our industry. I think that one of the things that is so beautiful about this is that it goes against what I've observed about the malt supply chain, the sort of more commoditized supply chain, is that a lot of the research is being done within companies, within large companies, and isn't being shared. So there's not always that collaborative approach to it. So, you know, there are big companies out there that are both maltsters and brewers, or large malt houses, and they might have been doing some of the stuff. They might have a lot of the same data, but they're doing it in their own way, and they're not necessarily sharing that information with kind of the general public. So that makes it hard for an industry to evolve if things are being kept kind of in that more, you know, close to the chest sort of capitalistic way of looking at things.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, that's kind of typical within the broad food and beverage space. That's kind of how it is. But I will say that the large maltsters and large brewers have been willing to at least participate with what we've been doing when tapped for resources. And so they're willing to participate and put in some resources. So they've been really great to work with, although I'm sure they're doing their own research to understand malt flavor. Why wouldn't they? But yeah, I think it's a great story about just folks with just no ulterior motives. Just our agenda is to really understand this to understand grains and flavor. And part of what kept me interested in it was also being able to work with you too.
Totally. I agree.
We've had a lot of fun throughout it.
Yeah. I wonder if, you know, we hadn't met and become friends, if, you know, I think we both fuel each other's passion in this way. And it's definitely, you know, being friends with you and getting to just casually talk to you about things around sensory has been an incredible education for me, as somebody without a lot of, you know, background in that. So I know that the method, you know, we use at Valley Malt, you know, before a batch of malt leaves the kiln, it's being hot steeped and, you know, checked for, we use it for color and for flavor and making sure that it's true to brand. And then it's also just such an I mean, you know, it's so easy to train our staff on how to do it. So, you know, anybody that's got the time can do it. Doesn't have to be this one specialized person. So yeah, it's pretty amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. And it shows in the quality of your malt. Like you're passionate about it, and you do the things. It's really consistent. It's really delicious.
Yeah. I can't imagine a malt house that is constantly tasting their malt not having good malt, right? Because it's like once you start tasting it, it's pretty obvious.
Yes. Yeah, it's just the act of measuring alone will dictate the outcome of the flavor, because it will just kind of be a part of who your company is and what you're doing. And so just tasting is just such a low lift, but it's so insightful. You really don't need to do anything besides just getting familiar with your product's flavor.
Yeah. One question about sort of this evolution is, I know we've COVID has put sort of a big wet blanket on a lot of things. I think we're all still coming out from that wet blanket a little bit, but any thoughts on what we still have left to do in malt sensory?
Yeah. I think it's a good question. I've been admittedly a little out of it over the last couple of years, out of like the direct malt discussion. There's still a decent amount of good research that's going on with like Harmony at Hartwick, and I believe CSU is there's still a decent amount of like good research going on. I'd kind of like to see more of an understanding of, I mean, what you and I worked on a little while ago was really interesting. Looking at a couple of different varieties, and this was inspired by what happened with COVID and the supply chain. You were looking to, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were looking to understand what you could do locally to mimic certain flavors that you would get internationally from malts that are well known for their flavor.
Yeah.
And we were able to do some pretty quick studies it literally took us a couple of hours to answer some of those questions and inform some of your process parameters to mimic the flavor that you would get from international grains. And so I would like to see more of that. So now like what we've been doing is kind of lies in the research world. We're publishing stuff, we're creating these tools, but I would really like to see more of these tools be utilized for everyday production questions, because why would we do this if it wasn't intended to be used? And that's kind of my criticism about like the academia world is like, if you can't directly tie this to what a business is going to do, why are we even doing it? So and all of our research has been really practical, because again, that's our philosophy. If businesses can't use this, we're not going to do this. So I'd like to see more of that utilization and more interest from craft maltsters and just generally looking to kind of like dip their toe in the water around what they can do with this information. And some people are, but that's the exceptional ones that are, winning awards and stuff, like they're all kind of doing that. But I'd like to see even the smallest maltster get curious about what they could do using flavor analysis.
Yeah, no, I mean, for us, as a malt house, it's like, why wouldn't you want to make the best malt that, so it's like, in our mind, German Pilsners are an incredibly delicate, refined type of malt. And, what kind of varieties are we growing? We actually have some very similar, we can grow winter barley. We have these low protein, low enzyme varieties that we can grow out here. And, how do we find the right variety and malting parameters to get as close to a German Pilsner as possible,
So cool.
Yeah. So yeah, that's that kind of thing where, you're actually helping small businesses to achieve an economic impact for their business is, I would say, knowing you, one of the reasons why you started Draft Lab. You're really here for us and trying to simplify something that, traditionally you might have had to hire a sensory scientist to do these things for your company. And a company of our size can't afford something like that at this stage in the game. And so having Draft Lab and having the Draft Lab team to lean on for some of this area of expertise has been, pretty incredible.
Yeah, that was definitely the whole idea, and still is the guiding star with what development we choose to do. It's all about how can we make this accessible for small businesses. Sensory science is something that large businesses have been doing for a very long time. So it's not a mystery that it can have an impact on the outcome of your flavor. But small businesses, it's not been accessible for them. So that's kind of what we've been focusing on doing and what we'll continue focusing on doing.
Yeah, it's always fun when we have a brewery come here and we're like, oh yeah, we're using Draft Lab. And they're like, we got Draft Lab. Nice. They're already, it's like,
yeah, that's the best. That makes me so happy.
Yeah. All right. Well, we are going to take a short break for this message and then come right back for more of conversation with Lindsay Barr. I think we're going to step away a little bit from malt and talk a little bit about arm wrestling.
Yes.
Let's take a short break and we will be right back with Lindsay Barr of Draft Lab Sensory Software.
First Tea is a proud sponsor of the Brewer to Brewer podcast. Some of the brightest brewers across the country have discovered the First Tea advantage. Hill Farmstead, Sweetwater Brewing Company, and Angry Chair are among the many who have used First Tea's unique and quality teas and botanicals to create top-rate beers. First Tea focuses on being direct, flexible, and fast. You can find out more about First Tea's collaboration with brewers and tea ingredients by visiting firsttea.com/blog. That's FIRSDTEA.com/blog.
All About Beer is back, and we're asking for your support to help provide the independent beer media this rich and colorful industry deserves. Visit our website, allaboutbeer.com, where we're frequently posting new content. And please consider throwing us a few bucks at patreon.com/allaboutbeer. We have low-cost memberships for individuals and small and large companies alike. Every dollar goes to help produce new articles and podcasts.
Looking for an easy hop sourcing experience? Yakima Valley Hops offers the finest quality hops from right here in our valley and premium growing regions around the world. Get the hops you need when you need them with ultra-fast shipping and awesome customer service. With a full line of liquid hop products and all your favorite varieties, no contracts are needed to brew with the best. Shop now at yakimavalleyhops.com. That's YAKIMA valleyhops.com.
Oh, Lindsay. Okay. So I want to say that this is, to me, the segue of talking a little bit about the Brewster's arm wrestling competitions that we've been doing together really comes from the success that we achieved in collaborating together. You know, there's something to be said for working with people where it just feels like all the cylinders fire pretty much, you know, they're all tuned and they're firing in unison. And so sometimes, you know, working with other people and planning events, it can be challenging. And our event that we put together at the CBC, the Brewster's Arm Wrestling event, it's quite an event to put on. There's a lot of pieces to it. And yet I think because of the way that we've worked together in the past in, you know, just kind of a little bit of mind reading, a lot of, you know, get it done kind of attitude from both of us, you know, we've been able to pretty casually, from the surface, put on this event that has become a really exciting part of the Craft Brewers Conference every year. So taking a step back, and letting our audience know what we're talking about. So the Craft Brewers Conference has always had an aspect of these sort of like side events that have happened, where, you know, if you're attending the conference, you might go to the BA's website and see, oh, there's a, you know, a beer tasting here, or there's a concert here, or, you know, so-and-so is sponsoring an event here. And so, we decided that we thought it would be great to bring women's arm wrestling to the Craft Brewers Conference, that was something that our community needed and that we needed when we attended this event, you know, something that was empowering for the people that attended it and the wrestlers. But also a big part of it was that the Craft Brewers Conference is such a big economic driver to the area where they decide to have the event, and that we wanted to do something where we were directly giving back to that community, because obviously a community, a city hosting an event, they're giving a lot to us. They're giving us a playground to be able to enjoy ourselves. And we wanted to make sure that we were sort of paying it forward and giving that, you know, giving money back to that community and support back to that community. So anyway, we decided that we were going to do it in a really fun way. And our arm wrestling events are fundraisers. Over the years, I think we've raised probably about $15,000-$20,000 at this point.
Yeah, probably around 20. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And we plan to do it again next year in Vegas. I remember the first year you wrestled as Lindsay the Barbarian.
That's right.
And you literally ate a squirrel on stage with fake blood capsules in your mouth.
Yeah, it's wow. What a journey, what a time that was. Yeah, the first one that we did was in Nashville,
Yep.
at the Five Spot.
Yep.
And it really came together. I mean, you were the one who was like, we got to do something. We got to give back to the community. And you're part of your local arm wrestling kind of troop in Massachusetts. And so you know a lot about how to put these on, and you have a decent amount of experience in community organizing. So it's been really empowering for me to be able to work with you and learn more about community organization. And I never really thought of myself as somebody who could do that or who was doing that. And this year, I think when we were in Nashville again, sitting on the stage and looking out at how many people were there losing their minds with joy, I was like, maybe we are organizers. maybe this is within our skill set. And we're really fortunate to be a part of a community that is the brewing industry that's really collaborative and really interested in sharing what's going on. So it's been fun. And yeah, it does take a decent amount of planning, but all of it is just so joyful because we get to meet these people, and like even all of the wrestlers that we have had over the last few years are not people that I had known very well, and you kind of get to know them and joke around with everyone, and you just like grow your own personal community just by having access to these amazing wrestlers that just really bring the energy, and people come for the wrestlers because it's so fun and so engaging and just out of control. And I think that when you're at conferences that are kind of professional conferences, you kind of need a little bit of that outlet just to just, pretend that your colleagues aren't there and bite off a stuffed squirrel's head on a stage and just really give yourself to it for the purpose of raising money for a charity.
Yeah, or having a bottle of Bud Light poured over your entire body for money.
For money. And that did raise a lot of money. So I'm glad that you were able to be showered with Bud Light. It's always so much fun. And I think that our work in the professional sphere, I mean, we met under the professional world of Malt and kind of cut our teeth on doing some of the work that we were just talking about with the lexicon and the method. And I'm really happy that our efforts have now moved more towards advocacy and community organization. I think that's where our attention needs to be right now. And
you think they need to write a white paper?
Let's go, BA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see that. Let's see where we could talk about some gaps in the industry.
Identify some gaps. Yeah, that would be hot reading. So I'm just so excited to start looking at Las Vegas. I think that we're going to have a really great time there, and we already have some boots on the ground. But I mean, just a lot of folks don't realize that you have to get a table. You have to, there's like all these like little things that a DJ, like all those details really kind of make it go on. And our referees this year, I mean, they've got to stay. So now we need, Andrea was referee a couple of years in a row. And now that we have professional arm wrestlers, we got to keep them. We got to keep those guys.
Yeah. These guys were like, what, 6'4" and like 300 pounds of muscle and Big Daddy and
Dakota.
Dakota. Yeah. Who are actual professional arm wrestlers and do these competitions around the world. And they donated their time and their table to come to the event and referee and make it really special. Yeah.
It's great.
I feel like we're just scratching the surface, to be quite honest, because even this year, we even had companies say that they would even want to like sponsor the
Right.
event. Yeah. It's kind of funny too. One of the things that like we don't necessarily say like, oh, this event is sponsored by Valley Malt and Draft, we're just kind of like putting it out there. Yeah.
Yeah. And those were intentional decisions. I mean, we talked about it. Like, do we want to have it sponsored by, Valley, Throwback, and Draft Lab, who are, the three companies represented that are doing the work behind the scenes? And our answer was like, nah, let's just keep this about the community. And keep the attention on the organization that we're raising money for.
Yeah.
So it's been fun.
Yeah. It's like pure joy pretty much. Yeah.
So if you haven't been, you got to go. We'll make sure in Vegas to get a giant venue, like stadium seating or something. We got to get it.
And if you're listening and you want to help or be a part of it, or you have any ideas for us too, things we could do better, let us know.
Yep. Yeah. It's amazing. It's just the best.
And we'll definitely have to put some sort of more information up about the date and sort of more details as we get a hold on things.
Yeah, we definitely will. I think this year we'll go by, I think we'll be able to kind of figure out all those details relatively soon. We have some people in Vegas that are helping out, and I think that it has enough traction at this point to where people are asking to help, and that's really good for us because the weeks follow, like the weeks up to CBC. A lot of my time, or a lot of our time, is planning arm wrestling, which is totally worthy. But it's like doing our talks, whatever talks we're doing, whatever booths we have at CBC and arm wrestling. Those are the three things.
Yeah. It's ambitious.
It is. But one of the things that I really like about you, Andrea, is your willingness to just be like, yep, we can do this. Like, of course we can do this. Let's make it happen. And we always make it happen. So, I mean, we didn't even talk about your mill, like the fact that you're milling now. You're like, yep, we can do this. We make malt, we can make flour, and you make amazing flour. Some world-class bakers are using your flour. So, I love that stuff. You're just you're a yes man.
Except to my kids, that I'm just the no mom, but
yes. Oh,
so
kids.
What other things are, before we sort of don't have any time left, what other things are kind of like joyful in your life, and may not have anything to do with beer, may just have to do with like personal or professional things that are going on, or what's kind of, it sounds cliche, but like what's bringing you joy and sparking joy in your heart and head these days?
Yeah, what's tickling the brain and the heart? A few things. That's such a great question. Career-wise and work-wise, we're in product development mode, which is really fun. We're kind of looking at the industry. We're talking to a lot of people. I think we have our ear to the ground. We've been working with hundreds of companies across different industries for 7 years now, which is crazy. It went by really fast. And
can you just share what a few of those other industries are, just so people can like start salivating?
Sure. Some of it's like a decent amount of meat processing, actually.
I was thinking more chocolate.
Yeah. Okay. And chocolate. I chose the grossest. So we work with chocolate. We work with just kind of general food, some dairy, some cheese, yogurt, some like vegetable growers, some like lettuce producers. Lettuce is like so hot right now.
Tell us about lettuce sensory. So is it like the crunch and the like, what are the things that are important in lettuce sensory?
Yeah. So generally for products that have generally low flavor profiles, mouthfeel becomes so much more of a thing. So I just spent some time doing butter analysis. We work with some butter manufacturers. And butter doesn't have a lot of flavor. So you spend a decent amount of your time talking about the mouthfeel characteristics. So yeah, like the crunch and the grassiness and how toothsome, fibrous. There's all that kind of mouthfeel stuff. So with butter as well, it's a lot of talk about mostly mouthfeel, which is.
Are you teasing
fun.
me to want to ask you about the single udder butter?
Yeah. Please ask.
Oh my God. So did Lindsay and I, one of the first times we met, we were at this schwanky restaurant that was like a farm to table restaurant, and they served us 5 different butters, and it was called single udder butter. Mm-hmm. And they had literally taken the milk from different cows on their farm that they allowed to graze whatever greenery in the farm that they wanted to. So it was like Sally loved to eat clover along the fence, and Marcy loved to eat this particular batch, and then we got to eat butter from each of these segregated cows.
Yes.
And taste the difference.
Yeah, so fun. It's so fun. And they were so different. We also like age mattered. The age of the cow really was kind of a big indicator. That's our next research project. What are the factors? What are the cow factors that kind of drive flavor? That was so fun. And once you taste the different flavors that come from different cows, it's so amazing that you can achieve any kind of consistency with like major manufacturers, but blending does it all. Yeah, that was fun. That was one of the second or third time that we hung out, and that really solidified our friendship. Like a 17-course meal and like 17 bottles of wine.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. That was your 30th birthday.
Yeah, so it was a while ago.
Yes.
Yeah, that was really fun. So that's exciting to me. Working on product development stuff. We're focusing on some training, some front of house work. We're noticing a theme in this kind of post-COVID world, that front of house training is a really important thing to get your folks onboarded to be able to sell your products. So we're working on some stuff around that, and I've been doing some just consumer research on that. So I was actually just at Dandelion Chocolate yesterday, talking to them about kind of some of their needs. On my way to work today, I'm working from a WeWork. I was thinking about just kind of the arc of my career, and at this point, I kind of am really focusing on using the skills that I've learned as a sensory scientist and as a brewer, and devoting those energies to software development. And there's so much crossover between those things. And whenever I forget about what I teach, which is, understanding what your goals are and having a target that you're going after, and then building towards those targets, like all those best practices and quality control. Whenever I forget that is when I start seeing myself scrambling, and I have to remind myself, like, what do you teach every day, and apply that to software development. So that's been a really fun thing to do. So that's what's going on in the work life. As far as other stuff, I've been in San Francisco for a couple of months now, and I'm just kind of really embracing that space. It's been really fun. It's July now, so last month was Pride Month, and we just had so much fun with all of the Pride activities in San Francisco. So just playing around at the Castro, and we had a bunch of friends in town, sailing and hiking, and like the Bay Area is just so unbelievably gorgeous if you can deal with the inclement weather, with the fog and stuff. So I've been enjoying that.
Yeah, you've since the time we've known each other, you've actually become like a sailor.
Yes. Yeah.
Through like a
started
community boating. Yeah.
Yeah, started sailing, I guess, in not that like 2021.
Mhm.
And joined kind of a dirtbag sailing club in San Diego.
Perfect.
And just kind of kept at it. And it's just
So
so
do you
much
have
fun.
dirty ascots, or do you wear ascots?
I don't know what that is.
An ascot? Oh, it's like
No.
those, like scarfy things. Like, you don't know what an ascot
Oh,
is?
Sure. I guess I'm not a good enough sailor to know what an
I'm gonna
ascot
get
is.
you one. I'm gonna get you one.
Please do. The answer is yes.
Yeah. So you find a good work-life balance,
Yeah.
even though running a business, you're kind of doing it all.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah,
you're
I think
enjoying it.
Yeah, I don't see there's a lot of blending, like if you don't have enough space for thinking and creativity and stuff, then you're just kind of not going to be that good at software development. So I think we've kind of created a culture where we are fine with just doing what we have to do in order to kind of keep ourselves sane and happy, and also just doing good work. I'm sure you get that, but yeah, your life is a lot of malting and milling. I feel like every time we get on the phone, you're like knee deep in a grain bin, which I guess you're not anymore, but you used
Not
to.
anymore. That's been a big difference in the last year, is that we moved to this new facility and, have more automated equipment. And so now I do come in to do quality stuff on Saturday and Sunday mornings, but just for like an hour, and otherwise I don't work on weekends. And that's been pretty amazing. Yeah.
Yes.
After 13 years, I think kind of deserve that.
Yes.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. It's amazing what you've been able to achieve.
All right. Well, I guess we'll probably wrap this up. I want just to say thank you so much, Lindsay, for taking this time to talk together. And I'm looking forward to the arm wrestling event next year in Vegas. And I also want to say thank you to Jason Perkins, who asked me to be on all about our Brewer to Brewer last episode. That afforded me the opportunity to be able to ask you to be on this with me. So thank you, Jason. And Lindsay will be back on the next episode of this show as the host, having a conversation with a brewer of her choosing. That will be on the air in 2 weeks, so make sure you tune in for that. Visit allaboutbeer.com and follow on social media. And to support journalism in the beer space, check out patreon.com/allaboutbeer. I'm Andrea Stanley of Valley Malt. Thank you for listening to the Brewer to Brewer podcast.
First Tee is a proud sponsor of the Brewer to Brewer podcast. Some of the brightest brewers across the country have discovered the First Tee advantage. Hill Farmstead, Sweetwater Brewing Company, and Angry Chair are among the many who have used First Tea's unique and quality teas and botanicals to create top-rate beers. First Tee focuses on being direct, flexible, and fast. You can find out more about First Tea's collaboration with brewers and tea ingredients by visiting firsttee.com/blog. That's FIRSDTEA.com/blog. For an easy hop sourcing experience, Yakima Valley Hops offers the finest quality hops from right here in our valley and premium growing regions around the world. Get the hops you need when you need them with ultra-fast shipping and awesome customer service. With a full line of liquid hop products and all your favorite varieties, no contracts are needed to brew with the best. Shop now at yakimavalleyhops.com. That's YAKIMA valleyhops.com.